On Monday, the City of Austin's Human Rights Commission voted on a recommendation to ban all official travel and business with the states of Mississippi and North Carolina. North Carolina's HB 2 restricts the use of bathrooms according to a person's biological sex and bars local governments from enacting non-discrimination laws. Mississippi's HB 1523 lays down different policies, including preventing people from being forced to take part in same-sex marriage ceremonies and letting businesses decide on rules on the use of restrooms, showers, dressing rooms, and locker rooms based on their religious beliefs. Two laws that have fueled the LGBT community to cry foul in the face of discrimination.
Whereas the states of Mississippi and North Carolina have recently passed repressive anti-LGBT legislation, and whereas these state-sanctioned LGBT discriminatory laws are inconsistent with City of Austin policy, and whereas the City of Austin enacted a gender-neutral bathroom ordinance which went into effect in January 2015, and whereas the City of Austin has a history of boycotting governmental entities which pass discriminatory laws, such as in 2010, when all travel and business was banned with the state of Arizona when they passed a horrendous immigration law, and whereas the City of Austin has an affirmative interest in making sure its employees are not subjected to unfounded detentions while on official city business.
Is working largely with the LGBT and especially the transgender community. I recognize the damage that is done just by having a bill like that exist.
Commissioner Roy, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. So the Commission recommendation, the Human Rights Commission recommendation authored by Commissioners Brown and Bowles passes.
And while all people, male, female, transgender, or otherwise, should enjoy the pursuit of happiness granted them in the free republic of the United States of America, it is abundantly clear to any parent and or female now facing what danger lurks behind the bathroom door as a result of this bullheaded approach to inclusion. A petition calling for a boycott on Target over the store's new bathroom policy promoting gender inclusivity has reached over 500,000 signatures. Featured at the American Family Association website, the petition contends Target's new policy means a man can simply say he feels like a woman today and enter the women's restroom, even if young girls or women are already in there. Furthermore, the petition asserts Target's policy is exactly how sexual predators get access to their victims. The new bathroom policy also disproportionately endangers female bathroom users, according to the petition. Target is literally allowing child predators to target unsuspecting children and adult females in their bathrooms. Clearly, Target's dangerous new policy poses a danger to wives and daughters, the petition reads. We think many customers will agree, and we think the average Target customer is willing to pledge to boycott Target stores until it makes protecting women and children a priority. Izzy Abraham, a father, wrote, basically, Target just told us and millions of concerned parents that we're no longer accepted, respected, and welcomed in their stores. Abraham continues, my friends, Target has crossed the line, and I believe this is a test case. Others vented on Twitter under the hashtag boycott Target. Jordan Cook wrote, I wonder how safe women shopping at Target are going to feel when a man follows her and her small children to the bathroom. Breitbart broke down 25 reasons why Target's policy is a really bad idea, including these stories. Seattle Parks and Recreation is facing a first-of-a-kind challenge to gender bathroom rules. A man undressed in a women's locker room, citing a new state rule that allows people to choose a bathroom based on gender identity. A man dressed as a woman was arrested in Virginia on Monday after police say he was caught peeping into restroom stalls 3 times in the past year. A 33-year-old Palmdale man who allegedly dressed as a woman while secretly videotaping females using a department store bathroom was charged with several misdemeanor counts Tuesday, authorities said. A biological man claiming to be transgender so as to gain access to and prey on women at 2 Toronto shelters was jailed indefinitely last week after being declared declared by a judge a dangerous offender. A 24-year-old man was arrested Tuesday after a hidden cell phone was found recording video inside a Chapman University bathroom, police said. A man has been arrested after allegedly placing a hidden camera in a Starbucks bathroom in Brea and recording at least 7 adults. Meanwhile, Child Services are ramping up the arrests of parents for allowing their children to walk home from school or for simply playing in their backyard, as happened to a Canadian woman just a few days ago. This is nothing less than an attack on children by governments bursting with corruption. And by spending your money at Target, you are supporting a politically correct system hell-bent on crushing the family. Leftist bleeding heart liberal troll, before you mindlessly throw this report under the bus, let me be abundantly clear. The issue isn't transgenders using the bathroom. The issue is the fact that millions of women and children are now in danger as a result of this crusade for the 0.3% of the population. Perhaps politically correct corporations should simply supply a third bathroom. One for men, one for women, i.e. transgenders and the 400,000 plus sex offenders now allowed in them, and one for families. John Bowne for Infowars.com.
Where you stand on the transgender bathroom bill, this interview is guaranteed to trigger you. Now, as exciting as that might be for me, I'm just going to go ahead and put it out there. That's not my intent to trigger you, but it is an opportunity for us to have some dialogue about this bathroom bill. Now, obviously, there's lots of arguments on both sides. You know, transgender people are actually being murdered, so I can see the case for a safety issue on that side. But opponents and critics say that this bill is exactly how sexual predators are going to get access to their victims. Now, here's some problems that I'm having with this, and that's what I'm going to be talking with our guest about today. This whole gender dysphoria, gender identity, everything is sort of a new thing for all of us to be dealing with, yet it's being shoved in our face, and there is a federal mandate now policing people who don't agree with something. Mind you, this is something that people who are actually dealing with gender identity issues haven't even entirely figured out for themselves, yet it's already now becoming a federal mandate. Now, people embodying two genders isn't an entirely new thing. I think indigenous populations even call it two spirits, and of course we all know Prince and David Bowie were two mainstream people who didn't conform to gender norms. But everyone is in a rush to be so trendy and progressive and just be all on it. States are now actually sponsoring sex changes for young people without parental consent. That is absolute madness. We are basically experimenting on young people without any idea of the long-term consequences. So my guest today is Walt Heyer. He is an accomplished author and speaker with a passion for mentoring those whose lives have been torn apart by unnecessary gender change operations. His website is sexchangeregret.com. So, Walt, thank you so much for joining us here today. Now, before we get into your personal story, I want to talk a little bit about your article, Drop the T from LGBT. I came across this article at The Federalist. For a lot of people in the gay community, it's been hard for them to disassociate themselves from the myth that gay men are pedophiles. And so that makes it really hard for them if they want to adopt a child and all of that. Well, now you argue that transgender people have high rates of psychological problems. It contributes to their identity expression and victimization, and so that reflects on the rest of the LGBT community. So, you know, now, of course, people are being mandated to accept this new gender identity, and frankly, it makes a lot of people very uncomfortable. So can you talk to me a little bit about this?
Yeah, you know, I tried to illustrate that, you know, gays, lesbians, and bisexuals are considerably different than the transgender population. And the transgender population, according to the research studies that I've been reading over the last 10 years, is that between 60 and 70% of them are suffering from what is known as a comorbid disorder and or some sexual fetish that leads them to act out as though they're a different gender when in fact no one can actually change gender. So the idea is that the gay lesbian community is kind of being associated with a group of people who have disorders when they, in fact, in the gay community do not.
Mm-hmm. And of course, you make the argument that if something happens down the line, where some sexual pervert uses the bathroom bill to his advantage to, for sexually predatory behavior, that's going to come back to haunt the LGBT community in full.
Right, and the cities who approve it, I can see, are going to be caught up in a lot of lawsuits when these things come down, and women do get molested or worse, injured, harmed, and who knows what can happen in the privacy of a bathroom, because this can happen at night in a bathroom. It doesn't have to be in the full view of people. In fact, the predators will find the most best place to go follow somebody, a gal, into a restroom and do something that is abhorrent and shouldn't happen.
Absolutely, and it's less than 0.03% of the population who, yes, they need protections, but you're trampling on the rights of a massive amount of people, women and children, who don't necessarily want to be put in a bathroom with a man if they're victims of sexual assault, or maybe they don't want to have to explain to their child why that woman has a toolbox, so to speak. It's right. A little bit advanced for a young person. So what do you think about the political response to this whole issue? It seems as if it's really the race to be the most progressive.
Yeah, and I do not understand how the lawmakers cannot get a grip on their own ideas about opening bathrooms up. Apparently, this is such a left-right kind of thing vote-wise, because they want to curry favor with the left-wing part of the party, so they open up bathrooms at the risk of children and women to be hurt, injured, and so forth. So, the lawmakers are being pushed by the LGBT, probably more the T than the LGB, and other groups to open the bathrooms up. And, the President of the United States has a transgender in the White House in the Office of Personnel, so he's push hard on this advocacy part of the bathroom bills across the country. So it's not a good thing.
Well, switching gears here, let's talk about a little bit what gives you the authority to speak on this subject, as well as why are you so passionate about educating people who might be thinking about transitioning?
Yeah, well, I started out as a 4-year-old transgender kid and lived out that whole transgender life until I had surgery at the age of 42 and lived as a female for 8 years in San Francisco, named Laura Jensen, and lived the life. And so I know what goes on. I know what happens. And after I lived 8 years, I began to study psychology at the University of Santa Cruz and discovered, quite to my own surprise, that these disorders in transgenders are rarely diagnosed, rarely treated, and there's a large group of disorders: separation anxiety, dissociative disorder, bipolar disorder, schizophrenia, and who knows what else that goes on that never gets treated or diagnosed. And even in the movie The Danish Girl, we saw the advent of autogynephilia, where actually transgenders actually fall in love with themselves in the mirror because they appear as a female. So we can see that these sexual fetishes become an ideology or a gender identity that needs treatment, doesn't need a new dress and red pumps.
Right. And that's the big thing that sort of kind of really has wanted me to bring you on the show today, because that's the thing that I find so frightening about all of this. We live in a country where a parent is being investigated for allowing their child to play in the backyard unsupervised. Yet in states like Oregon, the state is sponsoring sex changes without parental consent. And so you're so concerned because perhaps there are some underlying psychological issues that aren't even being dealt with, because a gender psychologist is just going to say, oh, I know what this is. You need to start taking hormone blockers, and then we're going to give you a sex change and you'll be fixed.
Right. The problem with it is what we do know is that up to 94% of children who at a young age identify as transgender, if we leave them alone and don't push or advocate for them to change genders will actually grow out of their gender dysphoria and become normal adults. The problem today is that all kids, every single kid ever born is going to be curious about gender, as they should be. The difference is that when today a parent sees someone curious about gender, they're identifying him as a transgender and then pushing him to change genders as though it's a good thing. And I can tell you from my own life, it's not a good thing. It damages and destroys life. It develops psychological disorders. Many of them become alcoholics and drug addicts. They never get their gender dysphoria resolved through changing genders. In fact, the original founder of transgenderism, Harry Benjamin, at his clinic, found that there were far too many suicides and unhappiness after changing genders. And so even his own clinicians at that clinic decided to go into psychiatry so that it could actually help people. But still, we're caught up in changing people's gender for whatever reason. It's got to be some power thing from these large, powerful groups in schools and all the way to the White House that I've written about as well.
Absolutely. Well, Walt, stay right there. We're going to take a quick break, and I want to kind of recap what we've been speaking about, as well as explaining what you mean when you say you were a 4-year-old transgender. So we'll be right back. Now, my guest today is Walt Heyer of sexchangeregret.com. Now, Walt, before the break, you said that you personally were a 4-year-old transgender. Explain.
Right. I started out at the age of 4 at my grandma's house, cross-dressing, and this became my little secret between grandma and me. And grandma eventually made me a purple chiffon evening dress. And what I realize now in hindsight, not at the time, I was very excited about the fact at the time I was 4 years old, that my grandma was, you know, she just loved me as a little girl. She was fawning over me. She was much more excited about me being a girl than she was as me being a boy, for sure. And so I got excited about the attention, about all the stuff that she was doing because I was being a girl was sort of exciting to me. So I think she created this excitement in me to want to change genders. And not only that, what I realized today and looking back is that she started kind of a fracture in my identity that I didn't realize was going on at that time. And it began to fracture my identity as to who I was. So I began my life at 4 years old thinking that I should have been a girl, that I would have been much more appreciated and liked, and my life would have been much better as a girl. So this continued all the way through into my teens. I developed a female name, but I kept it a secret and didn't tell anybody. So I internalized the Crystal West, became the first girl name that I picked up when I was 13, and progressed on. I did get married, told my first wife about my gender issues, and we both thought that getting married would cure them. And I ended up having 2 children, had a very successful career in the automobile industry. And by the time I was 38 years old, began to consider going through surgery and changing genders, because I felt like this voice that had started at 4 years old about changing genders needed to be who I really was. And so I was diagnosed with gender dysphoria and underwent gender reassignment surgery at the age of 42. The problem is that that 4-year-old child was a broken child. It was not reality. And I didn't learn that until I studied psychology, that we're actually breaking children by changing their genders. We're not helping them one bit. And that is why I'm so passionate about seeing parents begin to understand that they need to affirm children in the gender they're in. Now, it's much more difficult today because there's so much on television, there's so much advocacies, the schools and every place else is pushing this agenda very hard, so it makes it extremely difficult for parents. But everything that we do in life is about modeling. And if we can model the behavior of men for little boys and have men in their life that can show them what a man's to be like, it's going to help them develop a good sense of who they are. If that is absent from their life and they only have these other things going on where grandma's cross-dressing them or they're playing with their sisters cross-dressing, or their mothers helping them put on earrings and guiding them to gender change, they are not going to have a healthy psychological life. And that's why we see in the young population, I think it's age 10 to 24, are attempting suicide at a rate of over 50%. Now, I'm here to tell you that if changing genders was really a good thing, you would not see the high rate of suicide among the young people and the adults who are attempting suicide at the rate of 41%. People who are happy with their life do not try to end it by committing suicide.
Right, and that was something that you found, I guess, 7 years into living your life as a woman. You were fine, you were happy, everything was great, but then the novelty of it wore off, I suppose, and those underlying issues with the depression and everything began to resurface. And so was it at that point that you sought out a different sort of psychiatric treatment, or someone else that maybe wasn't a LGBT advocate type where...
Right. The first thing that really happened was when I studied psychology and realized that, transgenderism is comprised of psychological disorders or sexual fetishes, that you're not born that way. Nobody is born transgender. That is a total myth. And you can look on my blog at waltheyer.com and see all the research work. I don't know how many studies are in there, but they all show that nobody's born transgender. It's a childhood developmental disorder that never gets properly treated. So when I found out that it was a mental disorder, then I went to clinical therapists, and I was going to 2 of them at a time, sometimes 6 times a week, to dive into this issue so that I could get the treatment I needed. It takes a lot of work. Once you've gone through the gender reassignment surgery, it's even more difficult. I mean, I made it, and I've been restored and redeemed, and I'm back living as a man now for well over 20 years. I've been married this coming May for 19 years. And so there is freedom, but it's only going to be found in good psychotherapy. The problem is there's very few good, sound psychotherapists who are willing to diagnose and treat the comorbid disorders that are affecting the ideology of transgenderism, because the advocate groups are trying to shut down the therapy so you can't go get it.
Right. You're saying therapy is actually outlawed in 4 states, California, New Jersey, Oregon, Illinois, and the District of Columbia. They've banned conversion therapy. Now, we've seen this where they'll try to do this conversion therapy with gay or lesbian kids, but now they're saying even if you have these young people who are asking for the therapy that will help them with their gender confusion, they're being denied it, and they're being given instead the answers to how they can change sexes, which biologically cannot be done. And ultimately, you're kind of holding that truth deep down inside.
Isn't it amazing that if somebody wants to get help to avoid changing genders, there's a group of people that want to prevent them from being able to do it? I mean, is that just totally insane or what?
Mm-hmm. And so that's kind of the thing I feel like. I mean, obviously, anyone who's grown up with Prince or David Bowie, you've been introduced to some mainstream characters there that don't conform to gender norms. And so perhaps there is this third gender or whatever, something that new that we don't fully understand. But why are we experimenting on young children and changing their sex outwardly? Because you're not going to be able to change their DNA or their chromosomal makeup.
What we know is that regret sets in. I've got a stack of letters to my left here from people who written me from 3 weeks to 30 years after undergoing reassignment surgery that they have severe regret. They're asking me now to help them restore their life. And they come in every single day from different, I reach 180 countries around the world. My website's getting nearly 50,000 hits a month. And people are really struggling with this. And the advocacy groups are so powerful that they're really diminishing the ability for people to get the help they need. So there's only a few of us out there that are telling the truth and trying to help people understand, get the psychological help you need and avoid going through a radical surgery that's not going to really resolve the psychological problems in the long run.
Absolutely. And we have just about a minute left. So what do you see going forward? I mean, is obviously in your experience, this was decades ago. So, you know, times are changing. Do you think that this is just going to become more accepted? More people are going to be going through getting surgery they might regret, or will we learn that this is an actual third gender, an actual reality?
Well, there isn't a third gender. We know that. We do know that you can convince people that acting out a behavior can be sexually arousal. It can be exciting, but it is not an actual gender. It's just a psychological disorder. And people, if they can just begin to understand that there is help out there and the advocates won't prevent them from getting it, we can see this diminish. But as long as they stand in the way of good therapy, we're going to see this continue to grow, and we're going to see the same number of suicides or more and more unhappiness through this whole transgender phenomenon.
Well, Walt Heyer, thank you so much for all of your research and for sharing your story with us today. You have a massive amount of information for people to take a look at if they have any questions, parents especially, at sexchangeregret.com. Walt, thank you so much for joining us.
It was my pleasure. Thank you.